Hello, I'm Lauren Haldeman, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Nutrition Education and Behavior, where we are advancing research, practice, and policy. And each month, we select an article to feature as a press release with an accompanying podcast. Today's podcast article can be read in full at www.jneb.org for the next 3 months. And today, I'm really happy to be speaking with Dr. Annika Vahk, who is the corresponding author for the article titled Father-Focused Program Improves Healthy Dietary Behaviors in Mexican Heritage Fathers Long Term. And I'm really glad to have you with us today. Annika, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hello. We are so honored to be here. I am. Thank you so much for selecting us. A little bit about myself. I graduated 2022 from WSU. This is where the research was kind of collaborated with. And at the moment, situated at the Travis Air Force Base. My husband is a full career airman and getting ready to transition to Aviano Air Base in Italy. So we will be leaving there in 2027. So that's been a recent, news breaking on our end. So we're excited, ready to go back overseas. But in the meantime, just honestly, raising my daughter. She came into the equation surprisingly, and post graduation, have worked on the few papers related to the dissertation, and so here I am, just as my husband calls me, the doctor stay-at-home mom for now. Yeah.
I love it. You're doing very important work. That's for
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you.
Well, again, I'm really glad to have you with us, and I'm excited to talk about your work. So, can you give us a brief overview of the paper, including what you did as well as your results?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the father focus program that we have here in this talking about in this paper is a 6-week program. And in this program, there was a pre-post assessment that was done, but also we were really focused in looking at the long term, the maintenance of these behaviors, because a lot of the research focusing on nutrition programs, specifically anything limited or available to fathers, only looks at pre and post, and nobody really follows up on the maintenance, like what happens a year after, or even 2 years, as this paper did, 2 to 2.5 years, depending on when the group completed their program session. It was a stepped wedge design, so they were staggered, if that makes sense. And so what we ended up doing was taking the data from all these time points and then analyzing to see whether or not at the long-term follow-up there were any changes in the dietary intake of fruits and vegetables in Latino fathers. Specifically in our study, we used Mexican heritage fathers located in the lower region of Texas along the border communities, where, for anyone listening who's aware of that location, these are folks who have, high um, high prevalence for diseases such as those like type 2 diabetes, obesity, very limited resources. And so a population that's underrepresented, really in need of a nutrition program. And so what we ended up doing was looking to see whether their dietary intake of fruits and vegetables changed throughout this time frame, specifically after that program, right? Like, what's going on here? Did the program change any dietary behaviors as well? So we included a healthy dietary behavior score, which looks at specific dietary behaviors like cooking at home, or preparing vegetables or fruits for your children. So really looking at those two aspects, or primary outcomes. And what we ended up finding was that on a long-term basis, we did see improvements, positive improvements at the long term. Fathers had significantly increased their dietary intake of fruits and vegetables, and the healthy dietary related behavior scores did go up. What was interesting is actually the fathers with lower education had a higher increase in vegetables compared to those with a greater education. And so it's something that we as authors, discussed about how, in that region, maybe the fathers who don't have as much education on nutrition, of how much this is such a big need for them, a program that teaches them a little bit more about how to follow maybe healthier dietary behaviors, or selecting fruits and vegetables that are of higher fiber or micronutrient content. And then the other interesting finding that we got from the statistical models was that the fathers who were older had a lower intake of vegetable compared to the younger fathers. And some of the speculations we had there was maybe, well, the fathers didn't really feel like they needed to model that behavior to older children compared to younger fathers who felt, hey, these are young children that do need that modeling more to establish those behaviors. Or maybe the older fathers had longer work hours. So that was another big factor too. How do you get these fathers to participate when they're working so much? So a lot of different factors that can go into that. But overall, we saw positive improvements, and that was very exciting to see because we had some hiccups. Everybody experienced COVID. Like, whoa, what happened during that time? Right. So that was another thing that was worth discussing was, well, what did COVID do to everybody and everything? But overall, those were the main findings of the study. And it was just a really great project to see transpire and just implement and create. And we're just really happy with the work and all the people that put the work into it.
Sure thing. And the really examining the long-term impact is so important and is not always assessed in the way that
Right.
we need it to be. So I was glad to see that. And I know I spoke with you prior to getting onto the podcast regarding why I chose this article for the podcast. And I really felt that the focus on fathers, particularly among Latino fathers, which is an underrepresented group in the literature, was a real benefit to the research. So I was very much excited to talk with you about this. And I guess along those lines, can you talk a little bit about whether or not it was difficult to recruit Latino fathers to participate in the program? And if it was, what kinds of things did you put in place to help with that recruitment?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and you're right. This population is very underrepresented, not just fathers, but specifically Latino and in our study Mexican heritage fathers. But for the recruitment process, again, this project required a lot of community partners and promotoras who are trained native, Spanish speaking community health workers. I think those are very vital to this entire process because not only did they lead and teach these nutrition lessons, but they were very important when it came to the recruitment process because they're integrated in the community and they know a lot of these families and the right places to advertise the research and to reach out. And so with the recruitment process of this project, what we ended up doing was reaching out to families who had participated in previous, like maybe surveys and other things in the community, but also word of mouth was big, flyers. And so I think that that was very important is knowing who to talk to that can kind of spread the word among the families because with the families in this region, there's a lot that goes into like trust,
Sure.
and safety, knowing that this is something that they can partake in without major liabilities to them. And really, is it something that's worth their time? I think that was the key. And so the way that this was advertised is we really tried to put forth that this was focusing on the fathers who usually don't really get much of the focus, as you mentioned. And so I think that that really drew them in. But also, with Latino populations, cultural values are huge. Something like familism, right? That focuses on the family as a unit versus individual. I think that was another big key is advertising that this isn't just to focus on father, but also a time where you can bring in your entire family and spend time with your family in these sessions. And so I think that that was an important thing. And of course, the mothers were included. They weren't included in all six of the sessions with the father and child, but they were included because, again, having a partner or bringing in your partner from the household, the mother of the child or your spouse is also important for that spousal support. And fathers, again, Latino fathers, they want to see the entire family working as a unit. And I think that that was what was important in these recruiting efforts. And not just the methods of getting it out, but how do you really attract the father to this project? Is it worth their time off work or their free Saturday off? So I think those are really the main key points.
Sure. And it's clear that you put a lot of time and energy into that recruitment and really understanding what it was that was important for these fathers to participate in this study. So I commend you and your team on such a heavy lift.
Yeah, thank you.
So
Thank you.
sure. I'm also interested in some of the things that you said in the beginning when you're just describing the study about the how age was a factor in vegetable consumption and education. So based on the conversations that you had and studies findings, what are the next steps in research or for interventions that you hope to see implemented?
Yeah, there's we can talk all day about this.
Sure.
Minus a short podcast. Because you think back to your limitations and then what can you recommend? And so really I think the next steps would be just to we really we're limited to that small group of folks in the lower region along the border communities, right? And so I think it would be interesting to see this implemented or projects similar to this implemented across the states in different regions, not just your low socioeconomic status, but specific to Texas, excuse me, but places where you don't really see as big of a population, maybe of Spanish speaking individuals, or specifically in the Latino ethnicities, there are different, excuse me, population, there are different ethnicities, right? So you have your Mexican heritage, you have your Dominican Republic folks, and all of these differ by little ways. And so how can you create a program that's tailored for the specific cultures? I think that would be really interesting is how can you change it or alter it to make it conducive for these different ethnicities. But also in our study, we focused on traditional family structure, right? Which included the mother and the father in the household living together. What about those family who are single parent, right? What about a father who doesn't have the mother, or the spouse there? They've passed or divorced and they're not living together. That kind of a family structure, I think, would also be interested in future research. And then I do have to mention that I think creating some kind of maybe a Latino specific dietary measurement tool, which is specific to their cultural foods or traditions, might also be very beneficial when looking at the measurement of like your objectives and having something a little more rigorous and validated. So I think that that would also be really interesting to see if someone can come up with something along those lines for your Latino populations, because we have the general dietary measurement tools that everyone's familiar with, but they're also limited in many ways because of the foods that they offer or the selections that folks can have on those surveys. So I think that that would also be very interesting to see in the future.
I think there are so many possibilities for future interventions. And you're right, we could have probably spent a day or more
Yes.
talking about these. So,
That's yes, absolutely.
for sure. So my last question is just an interest. As a doctoral student in Washington, how did you come across this research topic and project that was based in Texas?
Yes, yes. Well, I have to give out a big thank you to Dr. Sharkey, who was the major, person who's putting this project together, and then Dr. Johnson, both in Texas at the time, who my dear advisor at WSU, Dr. Monsiváis, who had connected us all together. And so that was really wonderful. But what ended up happening was when I got to WSU, and this was me coming from Eastern Washington University, which is about a 30-minute drive, if that, right? But I was like, okay, I'm used to working with college athletes, college students. Let's go. What can I do here? And so I was also very interested in food insecurity at the time. And I'm like, all right, great. Let's look at college students, food insecurity, yada, yada. COVID hits. And I'm like, whoa, what can we actually do? And that's when Pablo Monsiváis was uh, like, okay, food insecurity, who can I connect you with? And Dr. Sharkey really came into the conversation at that point because he does amazing work or had done amazing work before he retired there, as well as Dr. Johnson. And so I got connected with the two and was like, this is an amazing project. Like, how can I say no, right? Like, just a lot of people, a lot of hard work that went into this. And I was very interested because I grew up with a lot of Latinos. I come from a small city in Washington by the name of Moses Lake, which is, if anyone knows anything about it, it's like the desert oasis in between Spokane and Seattle. It's nobody stops there other than to gas up. And there's a huge Latino population there because it's agricultural. And so it was near and dear to my heart. You know, I had a lot of friends growing up that were Latino. And so I think that's kind of how that got put together. But good question, right? All the way in Washington, Texas, and what are you doing? But so happy to have been a part of it. What an opportunity and just a privilege. I'm very happy and blessed to have been a part of that project.
Well, it's a great example of the importance of those connections in nutrition education. So kudos to you and again on your team for this wonderful project. I want to thank you very much for spending this time with me. And before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to mention?
Yeah, well, first off, thanks for having me again, once again, an honor. We are super, super excited to have ourselves featured. And then, yes, some acknowledgments, specifically two grants from the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and the Hispanic Serving Institute's Education Grants Program. So specifically those two. And then a big hats like off and a big thank you to all the participants, you know, taking the time, the promotoras that were involved, the other researchers, Dr. Sharkey, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Monsiváis, the list goes on, right? The community partners that partook in this. And it was just a lot of moving parts. And I don't think that just one person could have ever pulled this off because you need those individuals who know what they're doing, right? Are integrated in the community, can do the assessments, the needs assessments, and just in general, a big thanks to all of those folks that were on the ground running and really got this project going and started. And just, I'm very grateful to have been able to jump in and go, hey, let's go, let's do this. So yeah, I think that's about all I have. And just very looking forward to seeing what's in store, especially when it comes to, like you mentioned, the father research, the Latinos and other ethnicities, and just seeing what's to come in the research. Because I think with the way that our world is changing and the US is changing, we're gearing ourselves towards better health, better nutrition advice. It'll be very exciting to see how these types of programs are created and continue to help educate those folks that need it and to better overall our children and our population. So that's all I got. I'm just really excited to see what happens. Really excited.
It all sounds good to me, for sure. And to all of our listeners, remember, you can read this article in full at www.jneb.org for free for the next 3 months.